Daniel Bryan is off SmackDown. Two big triple threat matches on the Raw brand. AEW's Blood and Guts airs tonight. And Kenny Omega versus Andrade. Man, it is a loaded week in the world of wrestling, and we will catch you up on all of that news on this weekly Wednesday wrap-up edition of the Pipe Bomb Wrestling Podcast. The bomb drops now. Hello and welcome to this Wednesday edition of the Pipe Bomb Wrestling Podcast, the show that is for the fans, by the fans. Thanks so much for checking us out, whether you're watching us on YouTube or whether you're listening on a traditional audio format. We appreciate you checking out the show. My name is Chris Belcher. I am your phenomenal host, Mr. Podcasting, as this man right here likes to call me. He is the whole podcasting show, though. That's my brother from another mother, Mr. Jarrett Justice. What's the haps, man? How's it going?
How is it going, dude? I'm loving my shirt, and just kind of
here. Hang on, let me show the world. Let me show the world this nice Hulk Hogan WrestleMania Flying the Flag shirt. Look at that. If you're watching on YouTube, check out that awesome shirt. If you're watching on YouTube, you can check out my awesome shirt, and if you like it so much, you can buy it at ProWrestlingTees.com/PBW podcast. There is 4 great designs up there. Make sure that you check all of those out. Make sure you check us out on all of the social media platforms as well. Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. We are at PBW Podcast. You can follow me. Right there's my social media handle at Chris Belcher 24. And right there below that is Jared's on Instagram, JWJust01. Again, you can follow the show at PBW Podcast. And before we get started, ma'am, a little bit of announcement to make. You will notice on our fancy ticker below, like we like to tell you, if you forget all those things, make sure you check out the ticker below. You'll notice something
down where?
Down there. You will notice that something has changed. The Pipe Bomb Wrestling Podcast is now going to move from Wednesdays to Thursdays. The reason for this move is because Jared and I both really, really like NXT. And we really want to be able to do justice in covering NXT on our podcast. So NXT is now on Tuesdays. We normally record on Tuesdays. So this will give us an opportunity to watch NXT, gather some thoughts about it, and then record about it on Wednesday night. We don't care as much about AEW Dynamite, so we can record during that. We can talk about it later. So this will be the last Wednesday edition of the Pipe Bomb Wrestling Podcast. You will get your regular Monday show coming up this coming Monday. We'll tell you all about that at the end. Then we will move to Thursdays. So make sure that you subscribe on YouTube, subscribe on Apple Podcasts, subscribe on Spotify, all those places so that you get an alert when the new episode drops. I'm pumped to move to Thursdays because I'm really pumped to talk about NXT. Before we get to NXT, man, some more news that I haven't even dropped on you yet. This is news to you. Brand new segment that we are about to enter into on the Pipe Bomb Wrestling Podcast. This segment is called Beyond the Federation. And it's no secret that we mostly cover WWE stuff on this podcast. So in this Beyond the Federation segment, we're going to rapid fire some topics from outside of WWE just to get our take on kind of what's going on in the world of professional wrestling outside of WWE, because we both follow some independent stuff. We both follow some podcasts that aren't affiliated with WWE, all kinds of stuff like that. And we want to drop that knowledge on the people as well. So the first thing that we have to address is the new Conrad Thompson podcast that just dropped this week. My World with Double J, Jeff Jarrett. I've already listened to it. Highly recommend that everybody else do too. You and I, before we started recording, said we might have some differing opinions on this. What's your take on Jeff Jarrett and Conrad?
I listened to. I think they put out like almost like a teaser.
Yep.
And it had a little bit of Jeff and Conrad. And then I think Jeff was actually a part of one of Conrad's, like where he does like a remix because Bruce isn't available for whatever reason.
Yep.
So, I mean, I do. I did think that both of those sounded good. I
Yep.
did. But usually the type of podcast that you like is completely different from the type of podcast that I like whenever it comes to Conrad.
That's true.
For a long time, I liked Tony's show. You hated it. You liked Bischoff's show. I got to where I couldn't even stand like listening to his voice. Of course, we both like Bruce.
Sure.
But I mean, it just seems like we have a little bit differing opinions. So that's why I just went ahead and speculated that as far as Jeff Jarrett is concerned, we might too.
Well, I think Jeff is a very good mix of. I'm a nerd. Okay. You know that. All of our listeners know that. I am an information guy. And Jeff Jarrett has been from one side of the business to the other and back throughout his career. And just to hear the stories that he's going to tell and the information that he has to spill, that's my kind of podcast. I'm all in for that. You want some more of the humor in the podcast, which is why we both agree on Bruce Pritchard, because he's a great mix of information and humor whenever he's there.
Right. And if Jeff Jarrett tells interesting stories along with those facts, or just that the stories that he tells are entertaining and factual, then I think that I will like the show. But if he's very dead serious and everything's just a fact and that this is what it is, then I probably won't watch it, or listen to it or anything.
It's going to be good. I'm pumped. Listen, if you haven't listened to it yet, like I said, I've already listened to it. It's fantastic. Y'all need to listen. Also, in the news beyond the Federation this week, this coming Thursday, May the 6th, is the first episode of Dark Side of the Ring. And it is a 2-hour episode on the one and only loose cannon, Brian Pillman.
Ooh.
So it's going to be great. I can see it in your face. You're excited. I'm excited. We're going to cover some Dark Side of the Ring stuff a little bit later on after some of the episodes premiere. We did that on our last season of our podcast. So if you enjoyed that, stay tuned. We're going to do it again. Jared, we haven't spent a lot of time talking about Brian Pillman on this podcast. Briefly, share something about Brian Pillman that comes to your mind, like when you think Brian Pillman. What's the first thing that comes to your mind as a wrestling fan and your memories of that guy?
Just how memorable that his original character was, Flying Brian. I remember, to this day, you can talk to my dad about wrestling, and once it kind of got to like the Attitude Era, he kind of dropped off, maybe picked back up some during the whole Cena era, whatever that you call it. What was it they called it?
The reality era, is that it, or something?
There was
like that?
reality, but there was something before reality, like in between that and Attitude.
Oh, Ruthless Aggression.
Yeah, Ruthless Aggression.
Yeah.
And so just even to this day, I talk to my dad or whatever about different things in wrestling, and he'll bring up Flying Brian. Remember Flying Brian? I mean, it's just everybody remembers Flying Brian. And then he did a complete 360 with his loose cannon persona, if you will, character, whatever you want to call it. And he just became something completely different. But then before he really could develop like how Stone Cold did after he dropped the whole 316 deal, Brian died. And so he never really reached that pinnacle. And I think that's why so many people leave him out whenever they're having wrestling discussions. It was like, I remember Flying Brian. I remember all that cool stuff from War Games and him getting powerbombed by Sid and almost dying because his legs or feet hit the roof. And
yeah,
then you go to Loose Cannon, and it's like, I remember his leg being hurt, and I remember him stabbing a fan supposedly with like a pencil or something, and then it was just over.
And then he peed in the ring in ECW. And he infamously had the strap match with Kevin Sullivan. And he said, what is it? I quit Booker Man, or I surrender, or something, whatever.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's crazy stuff, man. I cannot wait for Dark Side of the Ring to dive into Flying Brian Pillman and all things that has to do with his career. I think it's going to be fantastic. We're going to cover it. Jarrett, how about this one? One more bit of Beyond the Federation news, and then we're going to get into a little bit of AEW stuff. In one of his first major appearances since being granted his release by the WWE, Andrade has challenged the belt collector, the AAA mega champion Kenny Omega. Andrade wants a shot at that championship. Kenny Omega tweeted a response to him that said, "I'm busy. Give me some time to think about it." Man, that is a blockbuster dream match that while Andrade was at WWE, we could only really just dream about having. Now it's probably going to happen. Wouldn't you agree?
I mean, it sure sounds like it's going to happen. And I mean, I want it to happen. I think this will almost bring back like a memory of RVD versus Jerry Lynn. Those crazy matches that were so epic and had these crazy spots. Two guys that could move and fly and go really fast. And I think that's what we might see again.
That's a really interesting comparison. I hadn't even gone there, but I mean, I think that's really good. I'm excited because Andrade, has always been one of my favorites. Kenny Omega, I've kind of been back and forth on for various reasons, but it is what it is. I think it's going to be awesome. Somebody sign me up and find out where that match is going to take place and how I can watch it. And I'm there. Let me just tell you. Speaking of Kenny Omega, let's talk about AEW real quick. I know I got some messages, some hate messages about how we may have crapped on AEW too much last week. And how we probably shouldn't have compared them to late 90s WCW. Jason Backwoods, I'm sorry. But that being said, we got to talk about AEW, and let's try to talk about a couple of positive things. The first thing is Blood and Guts tonight, the Pinnacle versus the Inner Circle. We talked about it last week. It's a great feud with Jericho, MJF, and you got Santana and Ortiz, and you got FTR, and it's gonna be a really awesome match. I really think so. What's your prediction for the match? Who comes out on top? So, I know I'm putting you on the spot. I need a prediction though.
I think that the Pinnacle will win, and I think that and this isn't just me coming up with this. I've heard some different things in the podcasts that I listen to. But I think it will almost be something like the Brian Pillman War Games. You have like a surrender, but I think it will happen because that the Pinnacle will get somebody on Jericho's team and threaten to do something dastardly and terrible to him.
Sammy Guevara, perhaps.
Yes, if Jericho doesn't surrender, and I think Jericho will surrender. They probably go ahead and do it anyways. Because they're the heels. But I think that's probably what we see.
Thanks, James E. Appreciate that.
No problem.
I agree. I'm not going to say that I completely agree with the finish prediction that you just gave. I think there's a very good possibility of that, but I do think that in order for the story to progress, I think the Pinnacle has to win the match. We saw last week on AEW, Hangman Adam Page. He has been this guy that's really been in the spotlight and out of the spotlight, and to me has had a lot of 50-50 booking. What I mean by that is he's been pushed to the moon, as Cameron Grimes would say, and then he's really kind of fallen off the radar. Yeah. Adam Page competed in the first match for the AEW World Championship where Jericho beat him. Then he went on to be tag champion with Kenny Omega, had a lengthy run. And then since then, I feel like he's kind of fallen off the radar a little bit. That could be because I'm not watching intently on a weekly basis, and that's my fault. But this is my podcast. This is the Pipe Bomb Wrestling podcast. I'm allowed to give my opinion. So Adam Page, throughout all of this, has still been ranked the number one contender for the AEW championship. And the commentators just drilled that in our heads last week. But last week he got defeated by Brian Cage. Brian Cage is a fantastic wrestler, a very worthy opponent, and somebody to beat Adam Page. It's no denying that people would look at it and be like, yeah, I could see him beating him, no problem. But Adam Page, like, I don't get this 50-50 booking with him. What are your thoughts on Adam Page as far as a wrestler is concerned? And do you agree with my assessment of the booking?
I do agree. And I think part of the reason why that you've seen that, the on and off again booking of Adam Page, or, Hangman Adam Page, is because that before AEW came along, nobody knew who this guy was. So in order to make this guy important, this being Hangman, then Pronouns Pal. You had to build a story and get people to know him, get people to care about him. But the problem is, just like what you said, it's been up and down. It's not been, we're going to start down here and then we're gradually going to let him ascend. It's just been up and down and up and down. And now, I mean, I think he's great as far as a wrestler. I think that he'll end up in WWE before it's over. But at the same time, it's almost kind of like he's a loser. He's been portrayed as a loser 50% of the time.
I mean, I get that. I totally get that. And I'm with you. I think he's a really good wrestler. I really enjoy watching his matches. I'm just lost on the story. And maybe it's as some people like to call it, maybe it's a slow burn. Maybe it's something that we really have to, piece together along the way. And that's another form of storytelling. I get that. If that's the angle they're going for, then they're doing a fantastic job. But I'm a wrestling fan, and wrestling fans are impatient, and we need results. I'm just not getting them with Adam Page, and it's kind of frustrating to watch because, again, you hear the commentators put him over and put him over and put him over, yet what's going to happen? Like, it makes me not want to tune in to watch, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, and just like I said, I think it all goes back to storytelling. And nowadays, it seems like nobody knows how to tell a story. And they could have told a story of this guy. He debuts and he's so, and he keeps kind of getting better and keep kind of getting better. Almost like Hollywood blonde Steve Austin, stunning Steve Austin, and then he becomes Stone Cold Steve Austin. That's the story that they should have told instead of here's this guy you don't know, he's awesome. Wait, no, he's not. Now we're telling a little story and he's awesome. No, he's not. And that's just not how you do it.
I think the frustration that I get with Hangman and with this whole Bullet Club, Japan, Kenny Omega storyline, all this other kind of stuff, because they teased a lot of Kenny Omega and Hangman Page breaking up or turning on each other or whatever. And since they lost the titles, they've been totally apart from each other. Now Kenny Omega is the champion, and I just feel like that we need to get that match before everybody totally writes that off and be like, because a lot of people, when that comes back around, they're going to say, oh man, I forgot about that. This is going to be awesome. Then there are some fans who, like me, are probably going to say, oh, I forgot about that, man. They probably should have done that sooner. I mean, it's going to be a good match, but I'm not as invested. You know what I mean?
Right. And I think we've already maybe passed that point.
Yeah.
Of the best time to do it, to do the match. Yep. But right now, if they don't start right now, next show, really trying to build this, and it's going to be too late.
I agree. I totally agree. Let's talk about another AEW guy real quick before we transition to the Federation, so to speak. Let's talk about Christian Cage, somebody that we haven't talked about on the podcast. He was the big surprise signee back at the Revolution pay-per-view. And of course, with all that hype and everything, there's no way anybody could have lived up to it. So Christian, unfortunately, it was a letdown. But that's taking nothing away from Christian. He's had some really good matches so far on AEW against Frankie Kazarian and Powerhouse Hobbs. He's really looked good. And I'm not just saying that because he's from WWE. I thought he's really looked good. And he has openly said in interviews that he chose AEW over WWE. Like WWE had a deal for him, but he felt like he could be more valuable. He liked the position of AEW better. What do you think about that? Do you think that WWE just didn't value Christian like they should have, being a guy who's been out of the ring for 7 years and is now back? What do you think about that?
I think that Christian would rather be the big fish in a small pond. I think that he knows. I mean, Vince McMahon wanted to put like a blot over his face because he thought he was that ugly. I mean,
sure he did.
So, what kind of recognition is Christian ever going to get? He's never going to be even a mediocre sized fish in a large pond in WWE. So, I think that's why Christian chose what he chose.
And I don't think it's a bad decision. I mean, look, in 2005, I think it was, he went to TNA and had one of the best runs of his career. Really established himself as a single star, came back to WWE and did some really good things, and then was forced to retire. Now he's in AEW with another opportunity to do some great things. You and I had an interesting discussion on the phone a few weeks back, and I kind of want to revisit that for our listeners, because at the end of that phone conversation, we said we should have been recording this. This would have been a great podcast. We talked about how Christian is one of the most underrated wrestlers in the history of professional wrestling. I think he's one of, if not the most underrated. Talk a little bit about who else you might throw into that category. Who do you think might be more underrated than Christian? Because let's be honest, in those 7 years that he was out, he was not inducted to the Hall of Fame, and I think he should have been. What are your thoughts on just Christian's career and who might be more underrated?
More underrated. I think Rob Van Dam is very underrated. I think that who else? Honestly, I think Bobby Roode is a little underrated. Definitely okay. Dolph Ziggler.
Dolph, I would definitely throw Dolph into that category. 100%.
Dolph could have been the second coming of Shawn Michaels, and they gave him that horrible name, and they made him like the whole male cheerleader, and then he's Dolph Ziggler, and nobody knows what a Dolph Ziggler is. I mean, it's like Vince would say, "Oh, what's a Dolph Ziggler?" I mean, I don't know what it is. But yeah, probably Ziggler, I guess, would be number one on that list. Come to think of it, as far as Christian and his career, I think that he did do awesome in TNA, but you have a very large portion of the fan base, just like me, who doesn't really know what he did in TNA because we didn't watch it.
That's true.
So if a tree falls in the woods and nobody's around to hear it, did it fall? Christian did all these awesome things, but if nobody really saw it, does it count?
Right.
So that's just kind of how I look at Christian's career.
That makes total sense. Yep, I completely agree. I didn't watch him during TNA either. I know a lot of people who did, and I've seen matches, and I've seen lots of good things. I just didn't watch it live. And I think up until this comeback, I was never really like the biggest Christian fan. Like, I liked him, I really did, especially because he was buddies with Edge, and I really loved their story of how they got into professional wrestling. I just don't understand why he wasn't put into the Hall of Fame in those 7 years that he was out. Like, okay, I'm going to throw this. I may be totally off base with this comparison. We have seen over the last couple of years DX get inducted into the Hall of Fame. We've seen the NWO get inducted to the Hall of Fame. Okay, one guy was in both of those factions that was inducted to the Hall of Fame, and that's X-Pac, Sean Waltman. Do you compare Christian to X-Pac? Is that what we're kind of looking at as far as maybe WWE's perspective?
I think that WWE portrays X-Pac way better than they. I think they think way more of X-Pac than they do of Christian. Just like what you just said, X-Pac's already in the Hall of Fame twice.
Well, the reason I point that out is because I don't think he's going to get into the Hall of Fame on his own. I think this was WWE's way of putting him into the Hall of Fame as a member of DX and the NWO. I don't think he's going in as a 1, 2, 3 kid. Don't think he's going in as X-Pac.
I think he's going in as 1, 2, 3 kid.
Really?
Yes.
Just because he beat Razor on that one Monday Night Raw?
Yes.
That's the sole reason. This is a conversation for another podcast.
And that match with Bret Hart. Whenever you think back on early Monday Night Raw, are those not two of the memories that come to mind? X-Pac doing that moonsault and like clocking Ramon in the head with his knee and beating and then running out. And then 1, 2, 3 kid against Bret Hart.
Sure, but at the same time, the first tag team ladder match had Christian in it. All these TLC matches, Christian. He's had a litany of career highlights as well. You are telling me that the 1, 2, 3 kid is more valuable than Christian?
In WWE's eyes, I think that was where we started.
What about in your eyes? What do you think? Yes, that's where this conversation started, but what do you think?
Man, there's memories with both of them. I mean, Christian and the Brood and coming up in that circle of fire. Like you said, Edge and Christian.
5-second pose.
Yeah. But it's just so weird because once Christian gets away from Edge into singles competition, it's almost like he's been Marty Jannetty'd.
That's true.
So maybe that's what happened.
That's true. I can agree with that to an extent, but at the same time, X-Pac had to have a dancing partner too. You look at Razor Ramon, who was one of the smartest minds in the business. You look at Bret Hart, excellence of execution. Okay. But outside of that, like he couldn't make stuff happen on his own. Does that make sense?
Yeah, kind of. Yeah.
Okay.
Well, it doesn't seem like Christian could either.
Well, that could be true too. I've just lumped Christian into the same category as X-Pac. Lord help me. Maybe the wrestling gods will smite me. I don't know. This is the Pipe Bomb Wrestling Podcast. In case you are just now checking us out, I am your host, Chris Belcher. Mr. Podcasting is with me. Try that again. Take a shot. It's the whole podcasting show. My brother from another mother, Jared Justice, and we are talking all things current wrestling. We have just covered everything beyond the Federation. Now let's move to New York, as they used to say. Let's go to SmackDown. Man, you can't talk about SmackDown this week without talking about the main event. Roman Reigns and Daniel Bryan in probably, I'm not even going to say probably, I'm going to say this was the best television match of 2021, bar none, case closed. These two guys tore the house down. Looks like Daniel Bryan is off SmackDown. WWE has even went as far as moving him to the alumni section of their website. His contract is not up, though, until September. What do you make of all these chess pieces moving around with Daniel Bryan and Roman Reigns?
Man, I would go as far as to say that was probably the match of the year, other than the WrestleMania triple threat main event of night 2. I think that was probably the second best match of the year so far. But as far as the way the chess pieces are moving, it seems like that WWE is going to put Bryan in timeout until that he either signs or says he's not going to sign. And if he doesn't sign, he doesn't come out of timeout. If he does sign, then out Bryan comes. So I guess we'll see what happens.
What do you think about the possibility of Bryan going to NXT?
I think it sounds awesome, but I think that if he doesn't re-sign or at least give them a large amount of hope that he's going to resign, then I don't think they'll even use him on NXT.
I think you're right. I think he's been very vocal about possibly working in other companies, and it's no secret that he wants to wind down his full-time wrestling career. And in companies outside of WWE, they make it more possible for him to only wrestle a couple of times a year and not be committed to anything and that sort of thing. So it seems like that's the way for Daniel Bryan to go. Ultimately, though, Bryan's a WWE guy. His wife just went in the Hall of Fame. Bryan is an absolute, no doubt, first ballot Hall of Famer, unlike Christian, like we just talked about. But Bryan is within the WWE family. A lot of people don't know he is a writer on SmackDown right now. So I think he stays in the WWE family to an extent, just a matter of how many more bumps he wants his body to take. Roman Reigns, before we move on to another subject, Roman Reigns finally got his new entrance music that he's been talking about for a while on SmackDown. I don't know if a lot of people noticed it or not. What were your thoughts on this new entrance music and this new kind of entrance for Roman?
I thought it definitely had a heel look and tune to it.
Yep.
But the thing with entrance music is you can't ever judge them off of the first time that you hear them, especially if it's a change. You know, if you're debuting this person, well, you can give them whatever kind of music you want. We don't know anything about their personality. We don't know how the music is going to suit their entrance, what kind of poses they're going to do on their entrance along with the music. Music is a big part of life and of wrestling. And it can make you feel things. It can make you feel like this person's a good person or a bad person.
Well, just to add to that, man, everybody talks about the minute they heard the glass break in the arena and they knew Stone Cold was coming out. You know what I mean? So the minute they hear that, it's like all bets are off. Your emotions are invested, and it's just like this. Now, Roman's music was definitely a change of pace, definitely something different. And I'm like you. You can't judge it by first impressions. I like the music. I think they got to give it some time to really figure out, okay, what do the lights look like? What does the pyro look like for this new music? Because it seems like they used all the same lights and graphics as his old music, and it doesn't fit. So I'm going to give them some time. I dug it, though. I thought it was great.
What was that Triple H said whenever that you heard Austin's music? OSH. Oh, crap, in other words.
Right.
Something's getting ready to happen.
Something's about to happen. Yep. And so that's what it is. So that's what you want to feel with entrance music. Roman's new music does not give you that. But at the same time, you hear Roman's music and you're like, it's more of not like, oh, crap is in excitement. It's like, oh, crap. Somebody's about to get whooped because here comes Roman, you know? So I thought that set a really good tone. On Twitter during SmackDown this week, WWE announced that next Friday is going to be a throwback SmackDown. Old school style SmackDown. We saw some old school Raws back in the day. That's what I was getting ready to ask. Do you think we see the Fist entrance for next Friday SmackDown?
Did you see the thing about where the guy's building the SmackDown Fist entrance in his in his basement?
No,
it's like a 4-foot replica. It looks pretty good, man. But yeah, I think they'll trot out the old set, if you will. If you will, baby.
Trot out the old set. That's funny. Speaking of trotting out some things that are old that are new again, let's move to Monday Night Raw. And the thing that has mixed emotions for everybody, the headlines have been made because Eva Marie is coming back. I see the look on your face. Obviously, there's mixed emotions about this because Eva Marie is coming back. What are your thoughts on this? Go ahead. Go ahead.
I mean, she's pretty to look at. Gosh, she's awful.
Here's where I'm going to argue with you on this. I am very excited that she's coming back, and here's why. Because we have had this good-looking female bad wrestler situation with Lana for a long time, and she clearly got over. Okay, when Eva Marie when Eva Marie was in the WWE the first time around, she was not given the proper platform to get over. She was on Total Divas. And obviously, you know, when you're on Total Divas, you're going to get a bad rap for being on Total Divas because everybody thinks you are what you are on that show. Then you put Eva in the ring and they started doing all these gimmick type things with her and they wouldn't let her wrestle. And then finally she just faded off.
Because she couldn't wrestle. She can't.
Faded off into the sunset, whatever. I'm excited for this.
She can't wrestle.
But, oh my gosh, that's crazy. Sorry. I'm excited for this because I think she's going to bring some personality to the women's division.
I mean, that's all she can bring. She can't bring in-ring wrestling. So, I mean, I guess if you just don't let her in the ring, you know, if you don't ring that bell.
Well, that's what they tried to do last time, and she didn't get over. So let's see what they do this time. Secondly, you know, with all of this, with all these thoughts about Eva, we just talked a couple of weeks ago about all of the releases that just happened. The Iconics got released, Chelsea Green got released, Samoa Joe got released, yada yada yada, and now you're bringing Eva Marie in. Do you think it's a slap?
The worst?
Do you think it's a slap in the face to them? I mean, like,
yes, because Eva Marie cannot work. Well,
she's been off for a long time. Maybe she's trained.
She can't. She isn't. She didn't. All those things.
Mark it down as you're listening to this final Wednesday edition of the Pipe Bomb Wrestling Podcast that Eva Marie is going to prove Jared Justice wrong. She's going to get in and she is going to make it happen. So let's get ready to move on to one more thing on Monday Night Raw. Let's not move to NXT just yet. I want to get your thoughts on one more thing on Monday Night Raw real quick, and it is in the women's division.
Well, let me explain why all of a sudden I looked around like an earthquake was happening, because it sounded like one was. Apparently a storm has moved in, and it's thundering, and I'm still not used to these sounds going into my microphone and then feeding into my ears. But it sounded crazy. But anyways, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
We thought you were just crazy. Look, anyway.
Having a stroke.
I don't know. Botavian could have been coming through your door at you.
Then I would not have been scared at all. So go ahead.
Well, you're not wearing a flowery shirt, so don't worry about it. He's not coming. So anyway, women's division on Monday Night Raw, we see that Asuka and Rhea Ripley are going to have a rematch at WrestleMania Backlash, but now Charlotte has been added to the mix for a triple threat match for the Raw Women's Championship. It's interesting that both of the main titles on Raw are now going to be contested in a triple threat match at WrestleMania Backlash, because you've got Lashley, Drew, and Braun Strowman for the women, not the women's championship, the men's world championship. Whoa, take a shot. What do you think about Charlotte getting added to this match? I know that was a long way to get there, but you get what I'm talking about.
You know, most people, gripe about Charlotte. Any match you put Charlotte in is going to be better for having Charlotte in that match. So, I mean, I have no problem with it. I think it would have been a good match without Charlotte, but I think that it's going to add a new dynamic and be just as good with Charlotte.
I think you've got a good point. I would rather just see Rhea and Charlotte one more time, but I mean, throw Asuka in there. I think it's going to be fine. I just think it's interesting that they're having two triple threat matches. Yeah. Let's move to NXT. NXT is happening as we're recording. It actually just went off the air. So breaking news from the NXT world, we have new NXT Women's Tag Team Champions. Candice LeRae and Indy Hartwell have defeated Shotzi Blackheart and Ember Moon in a crazy street fight. A really cool spot at the end. If you didn't watch it, go check it out. So we got new women's tag team champions. An incredible Falls Count Anywhere match earlier in the night between Leon Ruff and Isaiah Swerve Scott. But the big thing tonight on NXT, the one I want to get your take on, is the return of Finn Balor. We saw Karrion Kross in the middle of the ring. Kyle O'Reilly came out to confront him. Hey, I want an NXT title shot. Pete Dunne came out. Hey, I want an NXT title shot. Here comes Finn Balor. I want an NXT title shot. And then after all that's said and done, Johnny Gargano and Austin Theory come out and attack Karrion Kross as well. So if you are fantasy booking this whole thing, Karrion Kross is the NXT champion. Who is his next challenger?
Man, out of all those names, him and Finn Balor is the match that I want to see the most. So I think that's the first thing that I would book and go to.
I think Finn Balor needs his rematch. Cross beat him at the last takeover. I think he needs his rematch. I'm with you.
Yep, I think so.
I definitely am with you. Okay, man, we just crammed a whole lot into about 40 minutes of an episode. But before we go, we cannot sign off without handing out high spots and turd sandwiches, the highs and the lows of this week in professional wrestling. We always start with our turd sandwich because we got to go from the bottom to the top. What do you think, man? What's your turd sandwich of the week?
Finding out that Eva Marie is coming back to the WWE.
Well, that's my high spot. I'm just kidding. Totally just kidding. No, my turd sandwich of the week is having to see another tag team title match with Nia Jax and Shayna Baszler against Lana and Naomi. Not taking anything away from Naomi or the performer that Shayna Baszler is, but come on. This thing has run its course. It's terrible. It's awful. I'm going to go ahead and tell you my high spot because I think it's going to be your high spot too. And I think we're going to agree, hands down, nothing touches Roman Reigns versus Daniel Bryan this week. I mean, that match was just unbelievable. Floored me.
Yeah, I hate to see Bryan go from SmackDown, and yep. I hope that they do use him on Raw or NXT, and that they don't just kind of put him on the shelf.
These last couple months with Roman and with Bryan, obviously with Edge sprinkled in, it makes me wish that Roman and Bryan would have had a long, extended 6-month feud throughout their time together, and we just didn't get that.
Yeah, I would have liked to have seen Bryan bring his world championship that's made of like wood or whatever, and be like, say that he's putting it up against Roman's Universal title or whatever. I think that would have been cool.
Roman could have got some big heat for that because all you got to say is, what is this crap? This is not even, whatever. And then Roman gets instant heat for throwing the planet under the bus and all this other stuff. So that's instant heat. That would have been good. Yep. I agree. All right, man. Let's put a bow on this week's episode. I'm always going to say that now. As we put a bow on this week's episode, we want to again thank Botavian, the Blue Chip, for being on last week's episode. What a fantastic time we had interviewing that guy. An hour and a half of incredible content that you need to do yourself a favor. Go back and check out wherever you find your podcast, on Spotify, on Apple Podcasts, anywhere you get your podcast, and on YouTube. If you want to see our smiling faces, then go check us out on YouTube, and you'll see Bo as well with a little bit of a new look. He'll tell you a little bit about that in that interview. Please check that out. It was a fantastic time. Jared and I had a blast. This coming Monday, we went Coastal Championship Wrestling, the wrestler. Now we're going to go the promoter. Nelly Acosta, the promoter, the man behind CCW Coastal Championship Wrestling, is going to be on this Monday's podcast talking about Lucha Mania 2 coming to Nashville May the 15th. I had the pleasure of going to the last national show they did. Again, they're coming back next weekend, May 15th. Nelio is going to be on the podcast to talk all about that, give us a behind-the-scenes look at CCW. Jared, anything else you want to add before we sign off for this episode?
I hope that we never see Eva Marie again, but I guess I'm not going to get that wish.
Well, too bad, because the evolution, as they called it, is coming back. Be sure to follow us all over social media. We are at PBW Podcast. Again, check us out on YouTube. Check us out wherever you find your podcast. Subscribe. That way you get an alert every time we upload an episode. Buy yourself a fancy t-shirt just like mine. ProWrestlingTees.com/PBW Podcast. And please remember, our podcasts now drop Monday and Thursday. So next week, you will not get a Wednesday show. You will get a Thursday show. Again, that's going to give us a chance to cover NXT, which we are both very excited about. For my brother from another mother, Jared Justice, the whole podcasting show, we give the Larry Sabisco wave. I'm your phenomenal host, Chris Belcher. Thanks so much for checking out the Pipe Bomb Wrestling Podcast, and we will catch you guys down the road.